Committee on Finance with amendment nature as substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to. Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, first, thank you and your staff for your work on this bill. Also, our co-patrons, the gentleman from Hanover, Chairman Peace, Chairman Ware, I know the Majority Leader, the Whip, the Appropriations Chairman. Thank you, everyone, for your work on this. This bill, let me run through it. I think some of it got through it with the introduction by Appropriations Chairman and Chairman Ware from Finance, but because of the tax bill, the federal conformity tax bill, what happened each year, it wasn't a straight up change. When past years, it's been a reduction in rate. This year, what's going to happen, taxpayers are faced, as always, with a choice between itemizing deductions or claiming the standard deduction. If a taxpayer itemizes deductions, what will happen? You won't be able to choose to do that on the standard deduction. A core component of the federal tax cut was the increase in the standard deduction. The tax cuts also increased the federal standard deduction from $12,700 for a married couple to $24,000. Here's what we're going to do right here to make sure that the taxpayers of Virginia get their money back. Includes just a few things. Allow taxpayers to itemize their state taxes regardless of how they file their federal debt return. Increase the standard deduction from $3,000 to $4,000 for an individual and from $6,000 to $8,000 for a married couple. Maintain the existing caps for important deductions, including state and local taxes, SALT, and mortgage interest, and create a one-time deduction to be used in 2019. Also this, because the federal tax cuts will expire, they will marry this, and these provisions will also sunset. Mr. Speaker, the reason we do this, if we fail to do this, I believe the chairman said it, we will be changing policy to increase taxes on the families of the Commonwealth of Virginia. What this bill does is make sure that the families can get back, that they have the opportunity to itemize or take an increased standard deduction so that they can get back the average family, the firefighter and the teacher, the man and woman, this individual working hard every day, that they can get more of their money back. It could be up to $800 for a married couple, middle-income married couple. The governor, it's a philosophical difference, has a different idea. They would like to spend that money. What we are saying is we are going to send the money back to the people who pay the taxes. So often we come to this floor and we get the chance to talk about issues that strike our fancy. The issue we're going to talk about in this bill really is about trust. Who do you trust to spend the money, to allocate the money? We are saying, let's trust the families in Accomack, let's trust the families in Wise, in Southside, in Virginia Beach, in Arlington, to make the decisions of what they want to do with their money. Let us make a decision. Let's trust them to know what's best for their budget. Trust them to know how to spend the money out of their wallet and not Richmond. I hope to be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's the chart. We've just heard a lot about families. This bill addresses families at this point on up. What about the families at the bottom? What about the families who are earning under $50,000? What about those families who are 40% of the Virginians, the 1 out of 4 Virginians, they are 40% of those that will face higher tax bills, and the bill before us deals only with 18% of people who earn under $50,000. What about these families? And why aren't they being addressed by this bill when it spends all, I underscore, all of this expected revenue? It's because what this bill is doing is at this level up to $125,000, and at this level over $125,000 all the way up. It is giving money to people who are not paying higher Virginia taxes under these changes. We are shifting from those who need it most to higher and higher and higher income. Now, how does this bill, why does this happen? Because if you look at either the tax department's fiscal impact statement or at the requested JLARC affirmation of that impact statement, you will see that more than half of the money, and actually I should probably be saying, let's just lump it together, 2/3 of the money is all going to the upper income and just a pittance through the smallest increase in the standard deduction that I have seen in any of the bills that have been introduced and have not been heard. The smallest increase in the standard deduction, that's all that's being given to the low income. Meanwhile, you have the three major provisions. The first one being, let's just let anybody itemize whether or not they've done it at the federal level. I took the liberty of pressing the button on my email, which I've never done before, to send to all delegates the information that I had requested from Tax Department several months ago. How many people itemize by zip code? I hope that many of you have had an opportunity to look at that as I sent it out yesterday, trying to assure that we had informed debate, so that you would know whether or not this provision of this bill before us that is allocating more than half the money, how that would affect those zip codes that you represent. I hope you've taken a close look at that, because that, and I keep on saying it, that's where over half of the money is being directed. My other major problem with this particular provision is that we are opening the door to major fraud. Now, why would I say that? Yeah, 99%, maybe not 99, maybe it's only 95%, but the vast, vast majority of taxpayers are as honest as the day is long. But we've heard, I'm going to point to some news over the last couple of years about how some taxpayers claim that they've given charitable deductions to various causes. And when you look behind the foundation, you find that, in fact, it didn't go to the veterans. It didn't go to the whatever good cause was represented. We have always been protected by that in Virginia, because of the IRS audits. Now, obviously, they don't get all, but that's the way you go after this fraud. And if we decouple and say, whatever you want, just itemize it on Virginia taxes, not a problem. How in the world, without creating a major Virginia bureaucracy, are we going to look behind those claims? What was the mileage? What was the actual deduction? Where is the receipt? No capability. And again, we're giving away over half the money through that very provision. And then we have the other two provisions where we see that $58 million is going to, when you remove the cap on real estate taxes. I will repeat, as you've heard me before on this issue, think about a house in your district who is paying more than $10,000 in real estate taxes. $12,000, $14,000, and think in terms of whether or not the taxpayer in that house is in fact part of why this bill is weighted towards the wealthy rather than addressing the individuals who have taken the biggest hit by these tax increases. The bill also gives $5 million to GILTI, which is, again, something that has to do with global taxation, again, weighting it towards the high end, leaving out those who are hit hardest by this bill. At this point, let me conclude by again underscoring the fact that the bill before us with its impact, is allocating all of the expected but not for sure money that may be coming in from these changes in the tax fund. And I want to sincerely commend the chairman of the Appropriations Committee because of his work to make sure that we were responsible in our budgeting. He has made sure that we have kept our AAA bond rating when, in fact, it was under jeopardy for the last several years because of sequestration and the fact that our economy is 30% driven by federal spending. This is no time to be spending down those reserves that we have built up by allocating all of the speculative money through this tax bill, through passing this tax bill. This is the time when we see what is happening in trying to get a budget at the federal level, when we need to be super cautious, because we know from the last several years how close the rating agencies are looking at Virginia, and so much is at stake if we ever lost our AAA bond rating, not just in the fact that it speaks to what a great place Virginia is to do business because we are responsible in our governance, but also, quite frankly, it costs a lot of money if you lose the interest rate that goes with the AAA bond rating. So for those reasons, the reasons that it's not addressing where the impact is the greatest on the low income, because it's shifting money to high income who in fact were not hurt and are not going to be paying larger Virginia taxes, and the fact that we have to be responsible and not at this time be saying that, oh, we've got $570 million to just throw out there and see what sticks. For all those reasons, I sincerely hope for the integrity of the Commonwealth that you will vote against the bill before us.
Delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Head.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I've been listening to the debate back and forth on this bill, and particularly the gentlewoman's comments on the inequity in this program and the fact that the money that we would be having coming in would be going back disproportionately to the people at the top of the spectrum and leaving alone the people that are $50,000 and less. But the one thing that she fails to point out in this, which completes the whole story, is why that might be. Because you see, the tax money that would come in and then be returned back to the taxpayer goes back to the people that actually paid the taxes. The people on the lower end of the spectrum are at a lower rate. The earned income tax credit, both federally and on the state, is designed to eliminate their tax burden. On the federal level, the earned income tax credit becomes refundable, so that they actually get back money that they did not pay in, but rather money that other taxpayers paid in. We have chosen in Virginia not to do this. That's why we rejected that as part of the governor's proposal, because you cannot refund back equitably money that belongs to someone else. What this bill does equitably, in proportion to the people that actually paid it in, is refunds the money, plans to refund the money, to the people that actually paid the taxes. Because, you see, we believe that the people that pay the taxes are paying it out of their money. It is the people's money. It is not ours, and it must be returned to them in an equitable fashion, proportional to the amount that they paid in. That's why it's structured this way. To say anything otherwise is at best disingenuous, and at worst, I don't think decorum would allow me to say what it would be. So, Mr. Speaker, I just hope that we will go ahead and support this bill and get this out of here.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Would the delegate from Botetourt yield for a question?
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask the gentleman if he understood that I'd ask the gentleman if he understood that the 40% represented here of individuals paying whose adjusted gross income is under $50,000, whether that represents, according to the Chain Bridge analysis, the taxpayers who will be paying higher Virginia taxes. They are taxpayers, they are working. Chain Bridge Analytics looked at all the income levels, and this represents their analysis that 40% of those taxpayers, working families who pay taxes, that is what this represents, and that the bill before us only encompasses 18% of the money being spent is spent on those whose adjusted gross is under $50,000. Does the gentleman understand that these are working families, taxpayers?
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would respond to the delegate by saying that while I understand that that is what the Chain Bridge report perhaps does say, that other reports would take issue with that, and that my analysis of both this bill and the federal tax plan that this is all based on says otherwise.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a further question?
The delegate yield for another question.
I will yield for one more question.
Delegate yields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that, and I only have the other subject to deal with. Does the gentleman understand that everything that I said was about the equity for those under $50,000, that it was not how that was to be addressed, but only that this bill does not address it? I was not speaking about any issues that I may wish to debate at another time about the refundable earned income tax credit, but that I was only addressing the fact that this bill gives so little to those earning adjusted gross under $50,000.
Mr. Speaker, I would respond to the delegate by saying that, yes, I do fully understand that that is her opinion, but that I am in disagreement with that being inequitable in the way that it is structured in this bill, and that while that is her opinion, there are many, many others who disagree with her, me being one of them.
Mr. Speaker, could I point a personal privilege for a moment?
Delegate has spoken once in the bill. I'm going to allow you to speak again, but let me keep going in order.
All right, thank you.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, in her speech, the gentlelady delegate from Fairfax mentioned that we're just throwing stuff out there and see what sticks. Well, I think she threw a lot of stuff out there, and she's very good at, she's got a lot of facts and charts, and I always enjoy them and appreciate all you do. But let's cut to the chase on where the facts are on this. What we are saying in this bill is we are going to give the money back to the people. We are going to give the money back to some of these companies, businesses, not have businesses have a tax increase. What she fails to say when she said, oh, we're not sure if the money's going to show up, so you can't give a tax cut to people, what is failed to mention is that in the governor's plan, he spends every dime of this. He puts the money out there for expenditure after expenditure after expenditure around the Commonwealth, and the people of Virginia get nothing back. Guilty. He talks about that, a business issue. A business issue. If we fail to...
From Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the delegate yield for a question?
Not yet.
Delegate declines to yield.
If we fail, if we just do straight conformity on businesses, because of the way that it's structured, it is going to be a tax increase on businesses. That's why we're doing this. As for some of the numbers, I think the gentlelady failed to mention that 1 million individuals in the Commonwealth who make under $50,000 will get money back. There's 600,000 families, people who itemize. The firefighter married to the teacher will get about over $800 back. 2.7 million people will probably take advantage of the standard deduction. Almost 90,000 families, some areas up our way, will take advantage of SALT. This is real money back to people that pay the taxes. Now, maybe for a lot of you, $800 is chump change. For a lot of families, that's a lot of money. That's a car payment or two. That's money for tuition for a quarter. That's real money back into the pockets of Virginians. That is what we are doing. The governor is spending the money. Let's just cut to the chase. That's what the gentlelady failed to say. He spends the money, we give it back. He spends the money on projects, we give it back to families. We make sure businesses don't get a tax increase. We make sure people have money in their wallets. We make sure we trust the people to spend the money the way they want, the way they know how to do, and do what's best for their families. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it to the third reading.
Mr. Speaker,
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
will the delegate will the delegate stay on the floor for a question?
Delegate Yield for a question.
Yes, sir.
Delegate.
Thank you. I'd ask the delegate, and I appreciate the rhetoric, but I would ask the delegate, isn't it a fact that the governor, in his proposal, does not propose to spend every dollar of the money? And in fact, if you look at his proposal, he has suggested providing some of the money for relief, some of the money for the reserve, and investing some of the money, rather than you saying he's spending all the money. Isn't it in fact that that's what he's proposed to do, is to give relief, invest in savings, and invest in programs?
Mr. Speaker, in response, I say, when my friend on the other side says invest, he means spend money. When my friend on the other side says invest, he means redistribute your tax dollars from one group to another. And again, I say this is a time to give people their money back, to let them do it, to let businesses do what's best for them, and let families run their businesses, run their families, run their wallets like they know best, and not dictate it from Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, will the delegate
from
yield for
Charlottesville,
one
Delegate
final question?
Will the delegate yield for another question?
Yes, sir.
Delegate yields.
Thank you. I'd ask the delegate, if I were to bring over to you the press release that shows what the governor actually proposed, and it supports what I've suggested, that he suggested relief, retaining money in savings, and some investments in programs, would you read it and then acknowledge to this body that, in fact, that if that's true, you would admit it to us on the House floor?
I'm sure the gentleman's got all his press releases. I am telling you, my friends, the governor is spending money. He is spending $1 billion more. We're going to give that $1 billion back to the taxpayers of Virginia. We're going to give it back to businesses, and we are going to do what's right for the Commonwealth and move forward. And I appreciate the gentleman's question today.
Delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Jones.
Mr. Speaker, as there is much work to be done this afternoon with a handful of bills that came up to the 13th floor, I would move the pending question.
Delegate Jones, I don't generally do this. I did promise Delegate Watt she could speak. And so I didn't realize you were going to do that. So, the delegate from, I have my designated people up here. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I truly, and as I'm about to say, truly appreciate this opportunity. Perhaps there are many in this body who wouldn't take personal exception at the comment that what I had articulated was just opinion. I cannot tell you how many hours and hours and hours I spend before I come up with a chart to make sure that it represents the actual column after column after column of numbers. Because I know that most people, I don't know why my brain was wired the way it was, but it is wired that way. And when I sat down to say, I think this is the relationship, and now I've got to prove it, every time I do that, in the process, I learn. I learn what the actual relationship is rather than my opinion of what I thought it might be. So please, I guess it's the easiest way to conclude this. I have two cartoons that I have framed about my idea of public service. And one cartoon, if any of you are familiar with Aesop's fables, and the lion has the thorn in his paw, and he's in front of the nurse receptionist who says, "Do you have an appointment?" Rather than helping people who need to be helped. And you don't go on the bureaucracy of not, and by the way, the receptionist was a mouse, and the receptionist not taking out and not dealing with that pain. But the other one says, as these two guys are at the bar, the caption is, "I will not defend to the death your right to say something that is statistically incorrect." I've had those framed for a long time, and I continue, hopefully, to operate on both sides. And again, I assure you that what I have been speaking to, what I shared with you about the impact of the standard deduction and itemization as it exists in each and every one of our districts through the zip code information, I can assure you I do it because I believe decisions ought to be made on statistical accuracy and try my best to keep the argument on that basis. And with that underscoring, again, this bill does not pass muster on what it claims to do. It gives the money back, but it doesn't give it back to the taxpayers who are actually paying more in Virginia taxes. It is instead an overreach to the top. And by the way, I keep on saying final thing, by the way, it does not deal with the fact that Virginia is giving away approximately $80 million in this tax bill, not dealing with it. I do happen to know a bill that does deal with it, by not reverting back to the cap on total deductions that Congress removed. What does that mean? It means that taxpayers who used to be capped in their deductions, all of those contributions and other things I was talking about, at $313,000, that was the cap of all the deductions, now can take unlimited deductions. And when you look at Chainbridge Analytics work, which I do think is as best that we have before us, you will see that the advantage of that starts at those who earn about a quarter of a million, few more at $500,000, and gives away the store at $100 million, $80 million going because we aren't dealing with that provision when we could have used that to help those that are earning under $50,000 adjusted gross that are unaddressed in this bill. I do thank you for letting me, particularly at the beginning, defend my honor. Thank you.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I move the pending question.
Delegate Kilgore moves the pending question. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The pending question is moved. Remember where we're at. HB 2529, the question will be on engrossment. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. Ayes and nays are called for. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 43.
Ayes 51, noes 43. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
Mr. Speaker, that completes